We've seen war. We don't want war. But if you want war with the United States of America, there's one thing I can promise you, so help me God. Someone else will raise your sons and daughters.
Kiss my ass.
They're criminals.
It is a hole. You ever been there?
He says what everyone else is thinking.
I'm dedicated to it. I can't be stopped.
On March the 19th, agents of the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Agency, ATF, went to the home of Bryan Malinowski, the executive director of the Little Rock, Arkansas airport, and as such, happens to be the highest paid city employee in Little Rock. The agents arrived at his home in 10 separate vehicles at 6 a.m., an hour before sunup. They came to his personal home in one of the nicest neighborhoods in all of Little Rock. We were able to exclusively obtain the video. This is from a neighbor's security camera of the police vehicles arriving. No one has seen this before other than the family. We also obtained from the Malinowski family the video from their Ring doorbell camera, which you're seeing now. After covering up his Ring doorbell, they proceeded to break down his front door and entered his home. Mr. Malinowski and his wife were startled by the noise, as you could imagine, as well as the intrusion. Mr. Malinowski grabbed a pistol that he kept by his bed and went into the hallway where he saw several individuals in the darkness. He fired at their feet. They, in turn, fired at him, striking him in the head, even as his wife was only a couple of steps behind. He died from the gunshots. I am as supportive as I can be of law enforcement. I back the blue. And I give benefit of the doubt to the police officer when one is accused of wrongdoing. Let's be honest, their job is a difficult and a dangerous one. But incidences like this are deeply disturbing and demand transparency and answers. And the answers have not been forthcoming. The federal agents were not there to arrest him. No charges against him had been filed. They were there to execute a search warrant. They ended up executing a citizen in his own home. According to an affidavit, which was the basis of the search warrant and the search warrant itself, which are the only items that have been released to the public, Mr. Malinowski was suspected of violating the so-called gun show loophole, which allows private citizens to sell or buy firearms to other private citizens for their own personal use. And in that application, a federal firearms license is not required unless the person is acting as an actual dealer. But where that line is has never been defined in the law and is purely subjective. Malinowski was a gun and coin collector hobbyist. He regularly attended gun shows and set up a table to buy and sell guns and coins. The ATF had placed a tracker on his vehicle. They even went undercover to his table to try and purchase firearms from him. But on March the 19th, he had not been accused or charged with any crime of any kind. One of the attorneys who served as chief legal counsel for me when I was governor was later a U.S. attorney. He's now representing the Malinowski family to get answers regarding the armed raid on the home at 6 a.m. that resulted in his fatal shooting. The ATF has been strangely silent in all of this. Body cameras are required to be worn by agents in such a raid, but no footage has been released. In fact, no footage has even been acknowledged to exist. Were they wearing the required body cameras? Did they announce their presence prior to breaking down the door and entering? Did they give an adequate amount of time for the person inside to respond before breaking down the door, which is required under such circumstances? Why didn't they simply stop him as he backed out of his driveway or even find him at work? It's in a very public place, and he's a very public person. And why 6 a.m. when it was still dark and the occupants of the home were likely asleep? It was a search warrant, not an arrest warrant. And why were 10 police vehicles and multiple agents needed to search his home, and for what were they searching? The federal agencies have failed to provide any answers that his family and, frankly, the public have a right to know. I want to be on the side of law enforcement. I want officers and agents to take every measure to protect themselves. But should law enforcement escalate a search warrant to the level of a hostage rescue? And is there a trend to use excessive force to carry out legitimate law enforcement duties, perhaps as a way to intimidate people with a show of force that is more a military action than a police action? Right here on this show, we've talked with Peter Navarro, a 74-year-old economist who was arrested at the door of an airplane that he was boarding in Washington to travel to Nashville in order to appear on our show. He lives 50 yards from the front door of the FBI. So why did they wait until he was at the airplane boarding door to publicly arrest him, handcuff him, and put him in leg shackles? Just last week, Steve Baker, a journalist with Blaze TV, was on this show. He told of his arrest, bound in leg irons, all of this happening 3 years after he covered the January 6 riots at the Capitol. You may remember a few weeks ago, we had Paul Vaughn on the show, a father of 6. And he came to describe his arrest at 7 o'clock in the morning at his home when 4 cars of federal agents arrived at his home and handcuffed him in front of his children. What did he do? He prayed and sang in protest at an abortion clinic near Nashville some 3 years earlier. Tonight, I call on the ATF and the Department of Justice to provide answers as to why people are having their homes raided by SWAT teams for the mere suspicion of process or paperwork crimes. And what is the justification to break down a door at 6 a.m. and shoot a citizen in the head? And did the agents themselves follow the law that requires body cameras, an announcing of their presence and their intention? If so, release the video. And if not, why not? Who will be held accountable? If you haven't done it recently, read the Bill of Rights. It wasn't written to give the government the right to break into your home and shoot you. Every single one of the 10 amendments constituting the Bill of Rights explicitly limits the government in order to protect your freedom. And some people at the highest levels of the federal government need to read the Bill of Rights very carefully, and they need to obey them, or else they are the ones who need to have their homes raided before daylight and marched off in shackles.
Minutemen, huh? Why is there a term Minutemen? Why do we even mess with the verbiage, we the people? I'll tell you why. Mike Huckabee, God bless you. Welcome to Ted Nugent, Real America Voice, Spirit Campfire, where truth, logic, common sense, defiance, critical thinking, we the people, God, family, country, Constitution, Bill of Rights, 10 Commandments, Golden Rule, Declaration of Independence, law and order, good over evil, goodwill and decency, positive spirit and attitude, piss and vinegar and energy. Mike Huckabee is exactly, if I do say so myself, as am I, and I hope more and more of you are becoming, exactly what the Founding Fathers wanted all Americans to be: masters at spotlighting cockroaches. We've talked about this before, but I hope you absorbed the cruelty, the immorality, the treason, the criminality, the vicious, evil, outrageous abuse of power by those alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. Which, by the way, isn't it alcohol, tobacco, firearms, pantyhose, and lint? How about alcohol, tobacco, firearms, and bottle caps? So Bryan Malinowski in Little Rock, Arkansas is dead, regardless of the allegations. David Koresh, Randy Weaver, that wonderful lady at the January 6th First Amendment legal protest where Capitol Police punk Byrd shot and killed an innocent American. He wasn't in fear of his life. There was no justification for deadly force. America, I'm not kidding. If you don't bring this current example, since that happened, since I was watching the news this morning and training with my new Colt Python and my Glock 10 millimeter and testing a bunch of new Remington ammo because I'm a Minuteman. There are violations against the very foundation of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the freedoms as embodied, limiting the power of the U.S. government that they have now immorally, oath-violatingly abused and violated. Uncle Sam is out of control. And as I said, and thank you, Jesse Waters, for having me on. Thank you, Eric Bolding on Newsmax, and General Michael Flynn on his new podcast. I do media all the time. I got a big mouth. And Nugent's a big mouth. You think I have a big we the people accountability demanding mouth? That's exactly what I have. I and Mike Huckabee are exactly what the founding fathers wanted all Americans to be: suspicious of all authority, constantly monitoring all government activities, and holding all elected employees of the U.S. government, Fedzilla, which is bloated and vile and fat and dishonest, criminal. So they raided Bryan Malinowski's house at 6 a.m. and covered up the camera on the porch because they knew they were guilty of being criminals. The ATF, the SWAT team who raided his house and killed him, just like the ones who went for the power at Branch Davidian. They could have arrested David Koresh any day of the week. They could have arrested this guy at his office where he goes every day. They tried to sell a shotgun to Randy Weaver that was 1/8 of an inch too short because that matters. It doesn't matter. I matter. You matter. Truth, logic, common sense matters. I'll be right back raising more hell. It's my job.